Music Business Radio is brought to you by Avenue Bank, dedicated to serving Nashville's music industry. Find out more at thedifferenceisreal.com.
From Music City, USA, it's David Hooper and Music Business Radio.
From the TuneIn Broadcasting Studios in Nashville, Tennessee, this is Music Business Radio, your backstage pass to the music business. My guest today, John Oates. He's half of the best-selling duo of all time with over 80 million records sold. He's had 34 singles chart on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100, 7 platinum albums, 6 gold albums. His new album, Mississippi Mile, is available wherever records are sold. He's also producer of the 7908 Aspen Songwriters Festival. John Oates, welcome to Music Business Radio.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Let's go way, way back. Did you always know you wanted to be a musician?
I don't think I had much choice. I was singing when I was really a little kid. I mean, almost as soon as I could talk, and started playing guitar at 5, so probably should be a lot better guitar player at this point, but there's nothing I can do about it.
You grew up in New York City?
I was born in New York City, but I actually grew up in Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia.
Okay, so was that why you ended up at Temple University?
Yeah, it was just convenient and cheap, and that's the only school that would have me. So,
talk about Philadelphia's musical heritage and the influence that it's had on you.
It's really very important for both Daryl and myself. I mean, it informs pretty much everything we do. You know, Philadelphia's a unique place. I don't think a lot of people don't realize it. I've thought a lot about it over the years. You know, it's really one of the first northern cities, and when you think about it, really, it's kind of a cool melting pot of southern influences and northern influences. And, you know, you've got this kind of classical English influence that's kind of, you know, on that side. And then you've got the more, you know, kind of black influence from the South that happened. And really, when you put those two things together, that's really what Philadelphia music's all about. There's a lot of church music, and Philadelphia was also a hotbed of early folk music. And when the folk revival started, the Philadelphia Folk Festival was the second folk festival after Newport. And so a lot of the performers who were being rediscovered in the early 60s started coming to Philadelphia, and it had a huge folk thing. And that's where I kind of first started with all that. And I think it's that blending of urban doo-wop and folk and kind of traditional American music that makes the music at Hall and Oates what it is.
Talk about meeting Daryl Hall, because I know we always think of Hall and Oates, but before Hall and Oates, there was just Hall
yeah.
and just Oates, and you guys actually had an interesting way that you met.
Well, we both had bands. I had a band that had a single out on Philadelphia radio, and so did Daryl. And I was aware of him, he was aware of me, but we had never met. And the radio station had what they called a record hop in those days. It was a teenage dance, basically. And it was in a bad part of town, and we were invited to go there, and we were going to lip sync our records. And a big gang fight broke out, basically. And we ran out the back, out the elevator and the service elevator. So I like to say our entire relationship is based on greed and desperation.
Was there like an instant connection as you were spending time in that service elevator?
No. No, it was just like, hey, cool, man. Oh, God, yeah, all right, let's get out of here kind of thing. And then we actually were both going to Temple University. I was a journalism major. Daryl was a music major. He needed a guitar player in his band because he had basically a vocal group with a backup band. So I joined his group as a guitar player. And then that group subsequently broke up and then left the two of us, and we started writing songs and, you know, hanging out, and that's how it started, basically.
Did you guys have the same influences as far as music goes?
Well, the same but different. I mean, I think what Daryl brought to the table was more the urban doo-wop thing, and what I brought to the table was more the traditional American acoustic stuff. And he learned from me, I learned from him, and basically that's kind of how we put it together.
Now, when you were starting out, did you think, 30 years from now, we're still going to be together and we're going to go this big as we did?
No, we really, one thing about us is that we never really had any long-term goals. We took it one day at a time. I know it sounds like a cliche, but we just wanted to, our first goal was to write some songs together. The next goal was to record them. The next goal was to go on tour. The next goal was to make an album, and on and on. And we kind of took it like that. And we never really had this grand vision that, we would set the world on fire or accomplish really pretty much anything. We just kind of worked hard and did it that way. I know it's not exciting, but that's how it is.
Do you have any advice on keeping a relationship together?
Well, It's very hard for me to even talk about that because our relationship is so unique. I think the foundation of our relationship is the fact that we have these common roots, musical roots. But what makes it work is the fact that we're so different as people that we don't get in each other's way. I mean, I think that's the key to the whole thing. It's just a very unique situation. We're very different as people, but we like the same kind of thing musically. So I don't know how else to describe it.
David Hooper here, Music Business Radio, your backstage pass to the music biz. Here with half of the best-selling duo of all time, John Oates of Hall and Oates. It's got a new album, solo album, Mississippi Mile, available wherever records are sold. And you mentioned just kind of taking things one day at a time. Back when you were starting, was a major label really the only way to go?
Yes. I mean, pretty much. I mean, if you wanted to be a recording artist, you wanted to be on the radio, and you wanted to have a career, yes, signing to a major label in that traditional sense was really the only thing that you could do, and it's what every musician aspired to. So yes, it was. But there's a big difference between signing to a major label in those days as there is today.
Okay, let's talk about it. First of all, how long did it take for you guys to get that major label deal?
It took quite a while. Well, not, I mean, now I think back. At the time, we were very impatient, but it probably took about a little over a year. We auditioned for every major label in the country, either in Philadelphia or by going to New York City. Every label that we auditioned for at the moment when we were in the room seemed to love us. And about a week or so later, we'd get the word through this guy who was handling us at the time that they had passed on us, and we couldn't figure out why. It was a disconnection for us, and we couldn't figure out what was really happening. Was the guy who was representing us was, after the label liked us and wanted to sign us, he would go in and demand this ridiculous deal behind our backs that we had no clue what was going on, and the label just passed on us because of that. So once we actually woke up out of our stupor and figured out what was happening, we went out to California on our own, and we auditioned for a small label out there called Clean Records, which was a subsidiary of Atlantic. And the guy who ran it had signed Delbert and Glenn, which, of course, became, Delbert, I guess, pretty much. But anyway, he loved us, and he said, I want to sign you guys to my label. And so finally, we actually had a guy who was for real, and we were dealing with him one-on-one. He sent us back to New York to audition for Arif Mardin, the producer, and Ahmet Erdogan and Jerry Wexler, who ran Atlantic Records at the time. And we went back to New York, and it was funny because Daryl was sick that day, and the piano was kind of out of tune. And I sat there with my acoustic guitar, and he played piano, and we thought we blew it. This is not going to work. But Arif Mardin saw something in us, and he wanted to produce us, and he signed us. And then they said to us, well, you have a choice. You want to be on Clean Records or Atlantic? And we went, Atlantic. And that was it. So if you look on our early albums, it says Atlantic Records, but it also says, with courtesy of Clean Records. Well,
that must have been a huge thrill. Atlantic, huge history of R&B.
Yeah, I mean, that's where we wanted to be. There's no doubt about it. We were thrilled to be there. We felt part of that whole tradition, and Atlantic Records was a very cool place to be.
Talk about working with Ahmet Erdogan, because when I think of record label guys that really get music, he was the big one. And you once had a great quote. It said, it took you 3 or 4 albums before we found our groove. And he seems like the guy who would actually work with that.
Well, Ahmet, we didn't have as much to do with Ahmet as we did with Arif Mardin. Arif was our producer, and Arif was really the guy at Atlantic Records. Arif produced Aretha Franklin. He produced, Bette Midler. He produced so many people, the Rascals. Well, and on into later years, Norah Jones and everyone. But Arif, as far as I'm concerned, was one of the greatest producers of all time. He passed away a few years ago. It was him, really, that shepherded us through that whole thing. And he allowed us to make the creative mistakes that allowed us to find ourselves musically. And I think, for me personally, the greatest difference between the music business of today and the music business of yesterday is the fact that artists were sometimes allowed to make those creative mistakes, which allowed them to grow and have a career, which, I don't think we'd be around. If the Hall and Oates of 1970 was thrust in today's music business, we probably would have gotten to make one album, and that would have been it.
Can you talk about how the label marketed you? Because, Daryl's into doo-wop, and you've got the R&B, and you've got the folk influence. Where do you market something like that? Did they try to push you in a certain way, or were they really respectful of that?
They didn't understand us. A lot of people never understood us. And it took a long time because we did sound different. Most people heard us on the radio, thought we were black. That was the first thing. And we had tremendous success initially on urban radio, black radio, R&B radio, however you want to call it. And that's really where our fan base started. And one of our big goals was to get on, at the time, what we called white underground FM radio, where they played album cuts, because that was the cool, hip place to be. And it was hard for us to actually get on FM radio, which was the only place at the time was just playing album cuts. And eventually we did. We did it by playing colleges and building up a fan base and touring constantly.
When did you really, sit back and say, we are having success? Were you able to enjoy what was happening during that time?
Well, we had a couple different types of success. I look at success in different ways. I don't look at success necessarily as a number one record, although that certainly is having success. But, we looked at success like, well, let's get an album deal, and we got the album deal. And then we said, we want to go on the road, and we got to open for Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Stevie Wonder, all kinds of people. And we thought, that's success right there. And that's how we took it, step by step. And, and then we had our first number one record and, our first gold album and on and on. And the progression just continues. And it's, there wasn't a flash moment where we just stepped back and said, that's it. We did it. We made it. It just doesn't seem to work like that. I feel like I still haven't made it. In a weird way. I kind of want to make a better record and write a better song. And maybe that's the nature of people like me.
Let's kind of shift it into the great songs, because you certainly have had a lot. Talk about She's Gone, because that has kind of an interesting story. We always talk about life of the song on here.
Yeah.
And She's Gone has certainly had a good life.
Well, She's Gone is the song that put us on the map. And it was what was known as a turntable hit back in the old days, meaning that it was played constantly, especially on college radio and FM radio, but it never really became a number one record. In fact, it's never become a number one record, interestingly enough. We released it. It went to the top 40 in 1973, I believe it was. We thought, that's our best song. If that's not going to make it, what are we going to do, kind of thing. And then a group called Tavares picked it up and recorded it and had a number one R&B record with it, which, of course, for us made perfect sense because that's, kind of where we came from. As soon as Tavares had the number one record, Atlantic said, well, let's re-release it again with Hall and Oates, and it went to number 2. So that's the highest it's ever gotten. So maybe we should release it again. We'll see if we can get a number one out of it.
Now I can see love taking her toll on me. She's gone. She's gone. I better learn how to face it. She's gone. She's gone. I pay the devil to replace her.
Hey, this is Jay Praise. When I'm not producing and when I'm not working on my magazine, The Music Shelf, I'm checking out Music Business Radio. This is your backstage pass to the business.
Why can't visiting a bank be more like visiting your favorite neighborhood restaurant, where you walk in and are immediately welcomed and appreciated, where a banker actually greets you, shakes your hand, and calls you by your name, not by your credit score or your account number, but by your name? At Avenue Bank, we call that concierge service. And it may not be what you'd expect from a bank, but it's what you'd like a bank to be. Visit thedifferencesreal.com. Avenue Bank. Member FDIC.
Walk me out in the morning sun. Oh, sweet mama, I'm coming down.
Hey, this is Pete Yorn, and you're listening to Music Business Radio.
This is Music Business Radio. I'm your host, David Hooper, and with me today, John Oates. He's half of the best-selling duo of all time, Hall and Oates. He's got a new record, Mississippi Mile, available wherever records are sold. Were you steered into doing more pop music? I know the RCA years were a lot different than what you were doing in Atlantic.
The pop thing, it's interesting. We never really thought of ourselves as pop artists, but we did become, we became as pop as it gets. What is pop? Pop is popular. It means you have a lot of success and a lot of people like what you're doing and a lot of people are playing your records. That's, to me, what it is. But we were living in New York City. The 80s kind of came, and it coincided with the fact that we started to produce ourselves. And I think that's really when we came into our own. We had an amazing band. We decided to produce our own records, not use outside producers. That's when the tremendous run of hits started in the 80s. And people always, we had this bad rap that we were some kind of like hit-making machine that could just turn out these songs. And, we did, but we didn't do it consciously. We wrote the best songs we could. The fact that they became number one records was just a byproduct of a lot of hard work and hopefully good songwriting. So, people thought we had some kind of secret key to making a number one record, but I think what happened was our sound became the sound of radio, and everything we touched turned to gold. It was just one of those moments where it just all comes together.
Something else I find really, really interesting, I think about like the Voices album, which I think was 1980.
That was the first album we produced ourselves.
So by that time, you'd been in the game like 10 years, which is amazing for a lot of people to think about. Most musicians, rather, the average career is 7 years. So you were already 3 years up on them, and then it really started
I know.
kicking.
I know. It's true. I mean, we've been really fortunate. But, during the 70s, we had some success that enabled us to sustain through the bad times. Because we had Rich Girl, we had Sarah Smile, we had She's Gone. And those 3 songs were pretty powerful, and we had some stinkers, too. So those songs kind of enabled us to get through that period of time. And I think what happened was in the late 70s, after we had a few hits and we weren't doing too well, we reevaluated everything we were doing. We kind of backed off. We changed our band. We played clubs. We kind of did some things that kind of set us up for the 80s, even though we didn't know we were doing it. It was totally unconscious. But in the end, it set us up for the success that we were about to have in a weird way. We kind of just said, hey, if we have to play clubs for the rest of our lives, it's not so bad. We're good. But then we didn't.
Was the writing process in the 80s, when maybe you've got some really, really big hits under your belt and there's maybe a lot more pressure, was that different than when you were starting out in the early 70s?
Well, one thing about, I think, especially young artists and people today probably can't even relate to in any way, is that we had absolutely no influence from the record company during any of our recordings from the 70s or the 80s. A record company executive or representative never walked into the studio in 20 years. We went in there, we recorded the songs we wanted to record, the way we wanted to record them, and when their album was over, we handed it to them. And I know that sounds like I'm, on another planet. The way, the music business is so hands-on and so much meddles in the creative process to such an extent today. It was completely different for us. We had carte blanche. Our manager was very strong-willed, and he kept the record companies away from us, basically, and we just did what we did. And luckily enough for us, we were good at it, and we had success. I'm sure if we would have started screwing up, they would have clamped down on us, but I guess as long as you're on a roll, they just kind of let you go.
David Hooper here, Music Business Radio, in the studio with John Oates. He's got a new album, Mississippi Mile. It's available wherever records are sold. Earlier, you mentioned having, management when you were trying to get a record deal. That guy didn't work out for you. The new manager that you just mentioned, he was working out for you. And can you talk about putting together a good team, what you've learned about putting together a good team? Because not only have you had incredible management, over the years you've had incredible sidemen.
Yeah. Boy, well, in terms of management, during our big run through the 70s and 80s, we only had one manager. We had a guy named Tommy Mottola, who later went on to become president of Sony and CBS and Mariah Carey's husband. But anyway, he was it was almost like a partnership, a dysfunctional partnership, but a partnership nonetheless. He was a very strong guy and a go-getter, and he kicked butt for us basically, and also did some other things that maybe weren't so good. But in the end, we all had success, and we rode off into the sunset. Now, I manage myself. I've gone completely full circle. I mean, I'm at the point now where I've been doing this so long that there's really no point in me having a manager. Everyone always laughs, I think of myself like Chuck Berry. I like to show up with my guitar in my hand and the check in my pocket, and that's good enough for me.
Just plug in, you're ready to go.
That's it, man.
Let's talk deeper into your songwriting. Where do you think songs come from?
I don't know where they come from. It's magic. I think the songwriting process is is the best part of the music business. Without songs, you have nothing. You can be the greatest singer in the world, greatest picker in the world, whatever. You got nothing to play and nothing to sing if you don't have a song. It's all about the songs, and that's why I wanted to start the Songwriters Festival. That's why I'm so intrigued and always interested in new and young songwriters and collaborating. I think it's really it's the core of our business. Without songs, we have nothing, and that's the key.
Let's talk about the Songwriters Festival. It's called 7908 or 7908.
7908, yep.
The Aspen Songwriters Festival. You're the producer.
Yeah, 2 years ago, I wanted to do a show. I live in Aspen, Colorado. We have a wonderful acoustic venue there called the Wheeler Opera House. It's an old Victorian opera house, and it's just absolutely, in my estimation, one of the best acoustic theaters in the country. I wanted to play there. I wanted to do a more of a singer-songwriter type show. And I called out to some people that I really respected, Patty Griffin, Scotty Emmerich, who lives here in town, Tift Merritt, and Jimmy Wayne. I just wanted them to come out and try to do something very simple in the round, tell the stories, kind of give people a little glimpse behind the curtain of what it's like to write a song, where the inspiration comes from. The shows that I did turned out really well, and they were very well received. And interestingly enough, this past year, the City Council of Aspen was trying to come up with ideas for certain weekends where there was nothing going on in town. And one of the councilmen said, hey, I saw John Oates' show last year, and I thought that was a cool idea. What if we have a Songwriters Festival and let him produce it? So they came to me and asked me to produce it, and I said yes. So we're off and running. We have an amazing roster this year. This is our first year. In fact, we just saw Jim Lauderdale next door in the other studio. He'll be out with the Nashville, what we're calling the Nashville All-Stars. We have some of the great Nashville writers. I mean, there's so many, but we have Gary Burr, we have Jeff Black, Jim Lauderdale, Susie Ragsdale. And then we have people like Alan Toussaint. We have Tift Merritt, Jimmy Wayne's coming out. Got Richard Butler from the Psychedelic Furs. I mean, I wanted it to be eclectic. I wanted it to be all-encompassing and all-inclusive. I didn't want it to be, just country or just Americana or just anything, really. I just wanted great songwriters. We have the Bird and the Bee, they're a really cool indie group out of L.A.
And they just did an album, actually, speaking of great songs. All Hall and Oates stuff.
Well, it all kind of circles back in some way or another. These people are friends of mine, and they're people I know, and of course, I reached out to them first. And when you want to get something off the ground, you have to kind of lean on your friends a little bit.
Talk about the Bird and the Bee. What's the album called?
It's called. It's a little pretentious. It's called Tribute to the Masters, the music of Hall and Oates.
7 or 8 Hall and Oates songs.
Yeah.
Rich girls on there, on the radio.
What's unique about their version of it is that Inara George, who's the singer, she sang the songs. It's the first time Hall and Oates songs have ever been sung by a girl. And over all the years that we've made music and all the records we've made, we've never been covered by a female. Interesting. It's a really different way of hearing these songs. And Inara George, by the way, if people don't know who she is, she's the daughter of Lowell George from Little Feat. The other part of the Bird and the Bee, the Bee part, I'm assuming, would be Greg Kirsten, who's a great Grammy-winning producer. He produces Lily Allen and Keisha and a number of other people.
They did an excellent cover of Rich Girl. Just to give everybody an example of what it is, here's the Bird and the Bee with their version of Rich Girl.
High and dry, out of the rain. It's so easy to hurt others when you can't feel pain. Don't you know that love can't grow? Ooh, 'cause there's too much to give, 'cause you'd rather live for the thrill of it all. Oh, you're a rich girl, and you've gone too far, 'cause you know it don't matter anyway. You can rely on the old man's money. You can rely on the old man's money. It's a bitch girl, and it's gone too far, 'cause you know it don't matter anyway. Say money, but it won't get you too far. Say money, but it won't get you too far. Say money, but it won't get you too far, get you too far. You say you can rely on the old man's money. You can rely on the old man's money. You're a rich girl, a rich girl. Oh.
Bird and the Bee with Rich Girl on Music Business Radio. John Oates is my guest today. Half of the duo Hall and Oates, the original proprietors of Rich Girl. Is that how we say it?
Well, Daryl wrote it, so I can't take credit for that one.
You had a big part in it, though. Let's talk about that. I'm glad you mentioned about Daryl writing. He's got his solo stuff. You've got your solo stuff, but you come together to write together. How is that different from writing solo, writing as a co-write, we would say?
Interestingly enough, it's not different at all. Having pretty much only written with Daryl over the years, when I started writing with other people and collaborating with other people, I found that the songwriting process is very similar. Everyone seems to approach songwriting in a very similar way, at least the people who collaborate. When I came to Nashville to write for the first time, I wasn't sure what I was going to get into, and, went into the writing rooms and kind of did the 9 to 12, 1 to 5 kind of thing that a lot of the writers do here. And really the process was very similar. You throw out ideas, you kind of bat around some, concepts, and somebody comes up with some chords, somebody comes up with a melody, and it really it's very similar. So, like I said, I found a lot of writers seem to approach it the same way.
Give me a songwriting story, like how a song just really came together quickly, or maybe how one, didn't come together so quickly.
Kind of a cool story is Maneater. I saw this woman came into a restaurant in New York where we used to hang out in the Village, and she was one of the top models of the day, and she was really devastatingly gorgeous, but she had a mouth like a sailor. And she sat down and she was really rude, and I thought, how could this great beauty and this really disgustingly filthy mouth go together? And then I said, wow. And I went, she's a man-eater. And it popped into my head. Then I went, oh, here she comes, like, you better watch out kind of thing, because she scared me in a weird way. So I was attracted to her and frightened at the same time. So I went back and I started writing this thing, and I just started plunking around on the guitar, and it basically was a reggae song. I started out, and if you think about it, it really sounds good as a reggae song.
I think I've heard Daryl do it as a reggae song.
Daryl did it as a reggae song, but also I did it with Sam Bush as a reggae song at the Telluride Bluegrass Festival. Talk about a weird juxtaposition of stuff. Bluegrass, Maneater, and a reggae bluegrass version of Maneater. Anyway, so I started plunking around on it, and it sounded like, oh, here she comes. Watch out, boy, she gonna chew you up. So I was doing it that way, and it sounded really cool, and I was like strumming and kind of getting into it. And then Daryl and I got together to write, and I said, hey, I got this idea. I think it's pretty cool. And I played it for him. And he looked at me kind of sideways, and he went, Hall and Oates don't do reggae. And I went, okay. And he said, how about this? And he went, gong, 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 da 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 on the piano, which is more like a Motown feel. And in my infinite wisdom, I actually listened to him, which was a good thing. And there you go.
Oh, here she comes. Watch out, boy, she'll chew you up. Oh, here she comes. She's a man-eater. Oh, here she comes. Watch out, boy, she'll chew you up. Oh, here she comes. She's a man-eater.
Hey, I'm Johnny Mann from Computer vs. Banjo, and you're listening to Music Business Radio.
Why can't you have a banker instead of just a bank? I mean, if your banking relationship consists of pushing phone buttons when a computerized voice tells you to, is that really how you want to bank? On the other hand, if you knew your banker by name, and more importantly, your banker knew you by name, then you've got something. That's how it is at Avenue Bank, because that's how we think banking and life should be. Avenue Bank. The difference is real. Member FDIC.
This is Chip Green, a singer-songwriter out of Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm a Music Business Radio podcast junkie.
The show is Music Business Radio. I'm your host, David Hooper, and with me today, John Oates, half of the best-selling duo of all time, Hall and Oates, with 80 million records sold. Can a great song be done any number of ways? You guys have been really fortunate to have a lot of people cover you over the years. Lou Rawls, Tavares, you mentioned, talked about The Bird and the Bee. Paul Young had a huge hit Every Time You Go Away. Are great songs like that?
I think that is one of the marks of a great song, for sure. The fact that it can be reinterpreted and reimagined in different ways, because the core of the composition, the essential heart and soul of the writing, is good enough to hold up, with different approaches. That's a big part of a good song.
How about derivative works? And I'm talking specifically about sampling. De La Soul had kind of an interesting sample. I Can't Go For That.
Yeah, they called it Say No Go when they took it. I believe it was one of, if not one of the first sampled hits, it's certainly one of the earliest ones. And for us, it was the first one. And over the years, we've been sampled so many times. In fact, I Can't Go For That. That particular song has been sampled so many times, I can't even remember.
So, and that's pretty commonplace now, but let's take it back a few years when you first heard that. Was that weird for you? Like, they stole our song.
Well, I'll tell you how it happened, and it was very strange, because we were on stage in an outdoor stage shooting a video for a movie called Earth Girls Are Easy. We had a song in that Nile Rodgers produced for us. And we were on stage shooting the music video for that song. During a break in the shooting, this little girl came up to the front of the stage with a cassette, and she said, "Have you heard this?" And we said, "No, what is it?" And she had a little portable cassette player, and she hit the go button, and she played Say No Go by De La Soul. And we were like, what's that? We didn't even know what a sample was. We didn't even know that you could take someone's song and use it. I mean, it was a foreign concept to me.
You know what's kind of funny is you mentioned Nile Rodgers was producing that song, and you would have thought he would have let you know, because he had kind of a similar experience with Good Times was his song.
Right.
And
Right.
Rapper's Delight. And,
Yeah.
and he had similar thoughts on that.
It probably happened around the same time, I would say.
What was it like working with Nile Rodgers? For those that don't know the name, you know his work. He was in a band called Chic. He wrote Good Times, La Freak. He's an incredible songwriter, wrote for like Sister Sledge. Every disco hit ever, Diana Ross, probably has Nile Rodgers either on guitar, Chic backing him up, Nile Rodgers produced it, or he wrote the song. He's an incredible guy. I mean, what did you learn from working with him?
Nile is the best R&B rhythm guitar player I've ever heard, hands down. I don't care who it is. That guy's feel is just absolutely unparalleled. The only person that has a better feel than him is Sam Bush. I'm not kidding. If Sam Bush played R&B guitar, he'd be Nile Rodgers and vice versa. But honest to God, they have the best right hands in the world. And his feel is just incredible. And, you know, when he played in Chic, that rhythm section was cooking. I mean, that was a hot rhythm section.
Oh, yeah. Probably one of the best, the tightest trio I think I've ever heard.
Yeah,
I
they're great.
completely agree. On the subject of rhythm sections, can we talk about your sideman, T-Bone? Let's talk about T-Bone, because I know he had a tremendous impact on your career and just recently passed. And can you give a few words about him?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have to speak very reverentially about T-Bone. You know, and of course, people have to understand we're talking about T-Bone Wolk, not T-Bone Burnett. He was kind of what we jokingly called the Northern T-Bone. He was our musical director. He was the heart and soul of our band, honestly, and unfortunately passed away about 7 or 8 months ago. He was a great, not only a great human being, but one of the consummate best musicians I've ever been around. Without a doubt, in my estimation, best bass player I've ever heard, and also a great guitar player, great keyboard player, and just an all-around solid musician. So his loss for us was a big deal, and I'll never really get over it in a way. But we've been very fortunate over years to have great musicians play with us. And I think it has to do with the fact that we had songs for them to play. I might have said it before, but, you know, without a song, you know, the greatest players in the world don't have much to do. I think that's why we've been able to attract great musicians, and I feel very fortunate and blessed even to this day, like on my solo work, that I've been able to become friends with and have these great players like Jerry Douglas and Sam and Mike Henderson and Michael Rhodes and Dennis Crouch. I mean, these guys, I know I'm dropping names, but I can't help it because these guys are so great. And the fact that they wanted to play with me is I consider it an honor, and I love it. So.
Let's talk about the new record. How do you, well, first of all, name some more of the guys that played on the new record.
Well, I named pretty much most of them. Becca Bramlett sang backgrounds with me. Kevin McKendry played piano. He's in Delbert's band, and he also plays with Mike Henderson. If you guys don't know Mike Henderson, he's in the Steel Drivers, which is an amazing band, one of my favorites. And he always plays on Monday nights at the Bluebird. So if you want to hear some really good blues, go see Mike Henderson at the Bluebird. Let's see, who else is on the record? Peter Huttlinger, a very good friend of mine who also plays with me live, an amazing acoustic guitar player. And that was pretty much the band.
And the album is called Mississippi Mile. And these are songs that influenced you coming up and probably still influence you.
Yeah. I've always wanted to make a record of the songs that I liked when I was a kid, and this was the time to do it. The fact that I'm completely independent now and I can pretty much make the kind of records I want to make, I'm in such a good position to do that. I said, you know what, I'm going to do that. And I handpicked songs by Chuck Berry, Curtis Mayfield, Elvis, Otis Blackwell. Who else is on there? Mississippi John Hurt. Just the kind of stuff that really influenced me, but they're all done in a different way. They're all done in a kind of an acoustic, rootsy kind of way. So
it sounds like an exciting project. Did that make it easier to bring in the great musicians for it?
Well, they didn't want to play with me. They just thought the songs were good.
Well, that was my next question, because you are John Oates.
Yeah, well, it helps a little bit.
Oh, okay.
But you know what? The name gets your foot in the door, but you got to deliver. Honestly, I think the thing is that, sure, you call on someone, and maybe because of your name, they're intrigued. But in the end, if they're not having fun and they don't enjoy the music and they don't feel the music's good, they're not going to put their stamp on it. So, I'm honored that I feel like these guys enjoy playing with me, and we made some great music together, and I'm proud of it.
You recorded this here in Nashville.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So far we've talked about born in New York.
Yeah.
Philly was a big influence. The album is called Mississippi Miles.
I've been living in Colorado for 20 years. So.
Living in Colorado, you've got all the songwriters up there. To talk about Nashville's influence on you.
Nashville, is probably is the only place left in the world where music is the focus of an entire community. I think it's really unique, and thank God it exists, because there's nowhere. I mean, L.A. used to have its pretty strong music scene, and New York had it, but they've all kind of gone. I mean, every city does have a music scene, but here in Nashville, it's a whole community of people who live and breathe the music and the music business, and they care about it, and I really like that. I come here and I feel like I've come home in a weird way. It's very comfortable. Everything is at your fingertips. I'll tell you a funny story. When I did my last solo album, I had a guy who was playing fiddle and viola and cello. We were in the middle of a take, and someone said, an accordion would sound really good on this tune. And I said, yeah. I said, let's see if we can get an accordion. He said, I have an accordion. I said, why would you have an accordion? He goes, well, I play accordion. So here's the fiddle player. He goes in, picks an accordion out from his box, and then he turned around to me. He goes, doesn't everybody have an accordion? I said, well, not really, but I'm glad you have one. So that's Nashville to me. That's kind of sums it all up.
I want you to introduce this next song for us. It's Mississippi Mile, the title cut off the new record, which is available everywhere.
Well, as a songwriter, even though I was doing an album of other people's songs, I had to write a few myself. So Mississippi Mile, and luckily it came out, I think, good enough to be worthy of the title track. Yeah, it's a song, I don't know where it came from. It just came from a groove and an idea, and Becca Bramlett's singing on it with me, and I'm really proud of it.
So here it is, John Oates, Mississippi Mile on Music Business Radio.
Sometimes it feels like the road is my home. And I've been living on it for too long. I walk and find, I face my trial, and every step feels like a long, hard mile. Hey. Long, hard mile. Driving on by. Oh, nobody's stopping just to offer a riding high. I'm so tired, so tired. I stand by and try. Been such a long, hard life. But I can't survive another Mississippi mile. Yeah. I hope and pray and that someday I'll find someone to love me before I run out of time. What's behind me is a broken line. What's up ahead is a danger sign. I stand by a trial. Stand by a trial. It's just a long, hard life. Oh, but I can't survive another Mississippi mile. I stand by a trial. Stand by a trial. Such a long, hard life, but I can't survive. No.
John Oates on Music Business Radio, the song Mississippi Mile. And John is my guest today. What advice do you have for upcoming songwriters?
Wow. It's a tough world out there, and I don't envy starting out in this environment, musical environment. But that being said, you know what? It's still about the songs. Just write a great song. Someone will hear it. Someone will latch onto it. You know, a song for me is about connecting with the emotions of the universe. And I don't want to sound too hippy-dippy about it, but really the thing is that it's got to resonate with people. It has to somehow speak for the emotions and express the things that maybe the average person just would like to be able to say or emote but can't. That's what a great song is. And when you tap into that, there's something very powerful there. And so I just say, you know, as far as advice is concerned, just keep writing. Try to collaborate with people who are like-minded, who feel can enhance your vision and work with you and make what you do, just take it to another place.
It really is all about connecting with people. And one of the ways that you did it with the Hall and Oates and one of the ways that you're still doing it is hitting the road. And right now, you brought in this guitar I find fascinating. It's like a fold-up guitar. It makes hitting the road a whole lot easier.
The Voyager, yeah.
The Voyager. I want you to explain what the Voyager is.
It's a really cool idea. It's basically a collapsible neck guitar. It's an acoustic guitar that has a mechanical mechanism that you can release on the back of the neck, which allows the neck to fold back on itself, and it kind of folds up into a backpack. It's a really cool idea, and when I first saw it, I wasn't sure. I thought, wow, is this going to be kind of loosey-goosey and funky? Because, you know, the neck-body connection on an acoustic guitar is the key to the whole guitar.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you take that apart, you know, I'm thinking, But you know what? It's really cleverly done and mechanically very sound. So what happens is when you lock that neck in, it's amazing. The strings are almost in tune. And the moment you release it and folds back on itself, it's a real solid connection. And I was surprised on how playable and how nice it is.
Where can people get more information on this guitar?
VoyageAirGuitar.com.
VoyageAirGuitar.com is where you've got to go, because when we talk about it, a foldable guitar, a few people have actually brought this thing in. It just blows my mind every time because, you know, flying with a guitar is such a huge pain.
Yeah.
We've seen this video, United Breaks Guitars. Have you seen this video?
No, I haven't seen that.
But, you know, you always hear about guitar throwing contests that the airline guys are having. And
well, I like to bring my guitar on board. That's the only way it's going with me. So
well, and this is the way to do it because it actually fits in the overhead.
And it's got a great
compartment.
case, too. The case is really sturdy, and it's like this kind of a rigid backpack case, which is kind of cool, too.
John Oates is my guest today. He's half of the best-selling duo of all time, Hall and Oates. When we come back, we're getting some stories from him, more from John Oates when we return on Music Business Radio.
This is Keith Moore from IndieHeaven.com. I work with thousands of Christian independent artists, and when I want to learn something new, I listen to Music Business Radio.
You're listening to Music Business Radio on the web at musicbusinessradio.com.
Why can't a bank get back to me as fast as I get back to them? I mean, someone asks me a question, I give them an answer right there. But when you go to some banks for help and they tell you that you have to wait while they go out of town to get answers, that's just plain annoying. On the other hand, at Avenue Bank, all the financial decisions are made right here in Nashville. So when you go to Avenue with a request, you get a response, not a big delay. I like that. You will too. Avenue Bank, member FDIC.
Hi, this is Robin Ruddy, steel player for Rod Stewart, and you are listening to Music Business Radio.
You're listening to Music Business Radio. I'm your host, David Hooper, and with me today, half of the best-selling duo of all time, Hall and Oates. 80 million records sold, 34 singles charted on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100, 7 platinum albums, 6 gold albums. He's got a new record, Mississippi Mile, available wherever records are sold. Is there anybody that you would like to see cover your music or cover Hall and Oates music?
I'd like to have Joni Mitchell sing one of our songs, but I don't think that's going to happen. But it'd be nice.
Well, you were talking about full circle. Maybe if you covered a Joni Mitchell song,
hey, you never know.
She'd return the favor. Why Joni Mitchell?
I love Joni Mitchell. I think she's one of America's greatest songwriters of all time. There's something about her. She wears her heart on her sleeve, and she has a unique sound, and she's just something about her, just very sensitive, and I just always loved her music and her songs.
A guy who's been around as long as you have, I know you've got some more stories to share with us. So anything that you just want to get off your chest, whether it's, you know, a Hall & Oates story or coming up, just beginning musician or a solo John Oates story, what do you got for us?
Well, I'll tell you, it's kind of a funny story, and it popped back into my mind on the flight down here because I was sitting with Tommy Emmanuel, the amazing, amazing guitar player. I bowed down to him. That guy is just crazy. I love him. And I had never met him before. And I was sitting there in my seat, and he came walking down the aisle with his guitar, and I went, Tommy. And it's so funny. I said, Tommy, like he was my best friend because I'd never met him before. He said, man, he goes, I saw you in 1980 in Melbourne, Australia, because he's Australian. I was like, oh, we started talking. We had a really nice conversation. And he reminded me of the night in Melbourne when we played there, the first time we were in Australia. And after the show, we went to a restaurant, and they held the restaurant open for us. It was our bass player, his girlfriend, Daryl, myself, and our tour manager. And we're sitting around this booth, and the restaurant was empty because it was after hours, and the only other table was the cook and his wife and his brother, I guess. And we're in the middle of eating, and this guy busts into the restaurant with a ski mask and a sawed-off shotgun. And I thought, okay, we're in Australia. Maybe they're doing this for us. I mean, some kind of weird joke. But the guy was for real. He was actually trying to rob the restaurant. And he came over to our table with a shotgun, and we were like, oh, this is actually happening. And it was kind of being in a dream. And he wanted money, and our tour manager tried to give him a credit card. And he didn't like that too much. So he got pissed off. He ran over to the other table where the cook was sitting. And when the cook's wife opened her handbag, the cook grabbed him by the neck, punched him in the face, knocked him down, and we all rushed him. And we pushed him through a plate glass window. And at the moment that we were doing that, the police arrived because the kitchen staff were watching through the little porthole window in the kitchen door, and they had called the cops. And the next day, we were like big heroes in Australia. And it's funny. So that was the beginning of our Australian tour.
Yeah, that's the kind of publicity you just can't buy.
No, you can't buy that.
That's like some Elvis publicity or
that's
something,
right.
you know?
Yeah.
I know you got something else, man.
Oh, I got a million stories.
You got a million.
You don't have enough time. Most of them are too X-rated to put on the air. But, I mean, you have to remember, I was touring during the 70s and 80s a lot. I don't know. I don't even know where to begin. Just crazy stuff. Boy, you just want to hear anecdotes and crazy stuff. Well, I can tell you where I got the idea for She's Gone was really bizarre. It was 1970 or 71, I guess, in the dead of winter, and I was at some club in downtown New York, and I ended up at a soul food restaurant at 3 o'clock in the morning. It was the only place that was open to eat, and this gal came in, and she had a pink tutu and cowboy boots. So we started dating, and it was like pretty much immediately. It was 1971, so I had asked her out for New Year's Eve. So I was sitting in my apartment, and she never showed up. And so I sat around thinking, well, if she's not coming tonight, she's gone, basically. And I started plunking away at that thing. And the next day, Daryl came over, and he was going through a separation at the time. And so we shared our common sorrows, and he sat down at the piano, I sat the guitar, and we literally wrote the song in as long as it took to play, almost.
Yeah, that's wild. So she gave you a really great gift.
Yeah, the best thing ever happened to me.
Because the song has definitely outlasted the relationship.
Oh, absolutely.
What is your advice for upcoming musicians, guys who want a career such as the one that you've had?
It's hard work. It's hard work and commitment, and it's talent. You know, and unfortunately, talent is not always the criteria by which you're judged, and that's too bad, but that's life, and that's how it is. You know, you got to work hard. You got to make connections. You got to believe in yourself, and then you do have to have the talent to back it up.
You're listening to Music Business Radio. My guest today, John Oates, half of the best-selling duo of all time, Hall and Oates. You guys really cut your teeth playing live, like really getting to know your instrument. You guys are true musicians. The recording process has changed a lot since you were coming up. And these days, you mentioned talent, which made me think about this. You know, you can get into the studio, and we've got that joke here in Nashville. We said, boy, studio time's expensive. Don't worry about tuning your guitar. We'll fix it later.
Yeah, exactly.
So what are your thoughts just about recording processes and how things have changed, and new records being made compared to old records?
Well, I feel really fortunate that I had the opportunity to start in the beginning of the analog era, really. I mean, the first professional recording I ever did was on a 2-track analog tape machine at a place called Virtue Sound in Philadelphia. And Virtue Sound was owned by a guy named Frank Virtue, and if you really want to go back, he had one big hit record called Guitar Boogie Shuffle by the Virtues. It was an instrumental record. And it was his studio, and we went in there and recorded. So at the time, we had to record live. There were no overdubs. We sang and played simultaneously because that's what you had to do. So that was even kind of like what the Beatles were doing with 4-track tape and bouncing. So I had the opportunity to start there and see the entire technology of the recording industry move up through, into 4-track, 8-track, 12-track, 16-track analog. And then really in the 80s, I think analog recording was really at its zenith. I mean, it was probably at its highest form. We were using multiple, 24-track tapes. We weren't really bouncing too much because we didn't have to, because we finally had enough tracks to do the things we wanted to do. And then there was that really cool moment where digital technology entered. We started using sampling synthesizers like synclaviers and Fairlights. But even as early as in the early 70s, we had a Mini Moog. We had one of the first Mellotrons in America, which the Moody Blues made famous. And talk about a contraption. That thing was the weirdest thing ever. I don't know if I can even describe it to you if you even want to hear about it, but it was this console with a keyboard on it, and inside the console were these spools of tape. And every key had an electric motor, an individual electric motor, and a spool of tape. So when you pressed the key, and they were spring-loaded, so the tape was wound on these spools. The moment you pressed the key, it released the spring, and the tape wound past the recording head, and it fell into the bottom of this machine in a big pile. There was nothing to hold it. So when you played a key, you could only hold it for a certain amount of seconds. I think it was like 6 or 7 seconds until the tape ran out. Then it would literally stop. And then all the tape was at the bottom of the pile. And so it was the craziest contraption. It used to take us so long to even get it to work, to do a show, and most of the time the keys didn't work, most notes didn't work. It overheated and burned the tape, and smoke would come out of the back. I mean, it was just insane. So anyway, we've come a long way to Pro Tools HD at this point, but I'm a firm believer in digital recording at this point. I think Pro Tools, if it's done correctly with the right engineer and the right high-quality mics and great preamps, and what my biggest beef is with modern recordings is this concept of compressing everything to make it sound like it came through. Well, there's a reason for it. The iPod and the earbud are the worst things that ever happened to music, because MP3 technology is inferior. It's inferior even to CDs, and earbuds make it even squeeze it smaller. So we have a whole generation of people who think that good sound is what they hear out of an iPod and an earbud, and the whole concept of high fidelity has been lost. I mean, people used to love to listen to music for the broadness of the frequency ranges and the air and the space between the music. And that was part of the beauty of high-quality recording. And that's the kind of stuff I think we were doing, especially in the 80s. When I listened to the 80s records and 70s records, and you listen, every one of those engineers was really highly qualified, and you listen to the bottom end, the tightness of the bass and the richness of the instruments is just unsurpassed. Sure, you can do a lot more now, and you have a lot more flexibility, and you can do a lot more tricks, but in the end, there's a lot of records, modern records, just don't have the quality of sound that I would like to hear. I'm still a real old school and a throwback. I mean, in the last 2 albums I made a big point of making sure there was a lot of air and it didn't sound compressed. So, it shows you how out of touch I am with the modern world, but that's okay.
So you've had a long career with Hall and Oates. You've had a couple solo records.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the new Songwriter Festival. What's next for you?
Man, I've got to get through this week here, the Americana Awards. This week has been really crazy. I jumped into this thing not knowing really what it was all about, but I'm really glad to be part of it, because this Americana movement is a cool movement because it's really based on music, and I like that. I just want to encourage, good music and quality music wherever it may be. Yeah, go back home to Aspen, dive into the Songwriters Festival next week, and we'll get that out of the way, and it's going to be a lot of fun doing that. I've got to learn 18 songs by all these various people that I'm playing with, my reward for being the host of this thing. But anyway, and then right after that, I'm going on tour with Daryl for a couple of weeks out in West Coast. I don't know, just then maybe go home for a while.
So it's 7908, the Aspen Songwriters Festival. Where can people get more information about that?
You can go to the WheelerOperaHouse.org. Wheeler Opera House is WHEELER, and if you just Google the Aspen Songwriters Festival, you'll find it there. Yeah, it's going to be a great event, and I know it's a little short notice for people to come out maybe next weekend to Aspen, but put it on your calendar for next year, and hopefully it'll be bigger and better.
It's an annual event, so check it out every fall.
Yeah.
In Aspen, Colorado. And you've got the new album. It's Mississippi Mile. It's available wherever records are sold. So if you want to hear that range that John was talking about, check it out. John, appreciate you being here. I know you got a busy schedule, and we really appreciate it. It's been fantastic. I hope you get you on again.
Thanks, man.
So thank you for listening. We'll see you next week when I interview another industry guest. More from us, check us out online at musicbusinessradio.com.
Thanks for listening to Music Business Radio, a production of Tuned In Broadcasting Incorporated, Nashville, Tennessee. Recorded in the WRLT Lightning 100 studios. Music Business Radio is produced by Gary Crane, David Hooper, and Dan Buckley. Hosted by David Hooper. Engineered by Dan Buckley. Demo Derby coordination by Gary Crane and Jesse Smith. Special technical assistance by Tom Hansen. With Pro Tools post-production by Justin Hamill and Dan Buckley. And Lester bought it on eBay. For information on syndication, guest booking, Demo Derby music, or downloading previous episodes, visit musicbusinessradio.com.
Music Business Radio.
You've been listening to Music Business Radio, brought to you by Avenue Bank, dedicated to serving Nashville's music industry. Find out more at thedifferencesreal.com.